Welcome back to the Earth Keepers podcast. This season, I'm welcoming a series of thought-provoking guests to the show to discuss where exactly humanity is headed and how we can collectively create the future we'd like to see. We began the season exploring ideas around creativity, storytelling, songwriting, and myth to begin to imagine new realities here on Earth. Now, through these next few episodes, you'll be meeting people who are creatively working with sound, crystals, light, animals, and sacred geometry to help us remember how our reality here on Earth actually works and how we can creatively bring some of this ancient future technology into our daily lives. It is my deep hope that these conversations will stir something within you, or perhaps light a spark in your imagination for what you might be able to bring forward from the depths of your imagination into this reality. I think it's going to take all of our ideas, visions, and inspired action to arrive at this unknown future timeline, or rather, the next golden age. My hope is that this season inspires you to bring your own bit of magic into the world to help usher in what's next for us all. Before we get into this week's episode, though, if you're feeling inspired to go deeper and want to support the work it takes to bring this podcast to life, I'd love to have you join me in the Earth Tenders Academy. The Earth Tenders Academy is my online course and community where you can learn more about the history and energy of the community that you live in, hold space for the healing of humanity and nature, remember more about your specific gifts and role with the earth, and see the true magic held in your everyday environment. I invite you to step into this portal with me and hundreds of other Earth Tenders from around the world. Tap the link in the show notes to learn more about the Earth Tenders Academy and join us in this beautiful community. And now, on with the show. Do you have a memory of a golden age on Earth? Perhaps you've had dreams of a magical life in the sacred lands of Lemuria, Atlantis, or Avalon. A time when the people lived in harmony with animals, plants, stones, and water. Many of us also carry the memories of a destructive end of these golden ages, fearful that we might endure the same fate yet again in this lifetime. But as we stand here on the edge of humanity's next age, what will we create? Can we bring forth a new golden age in spite of what has happened in these other timelines? My guest today, stone medicine healer Sarah Thomas, believes that the crystals of the earth can show us the way. That in these years of purification that we're currently experiencing, the stones are helping us to access the deepest, darkest parts of ourselves that need to be brought to the light. According to Diana Cooper's book, Discover Atlantis, Atlanteans used crystals for almost everything. They were the source of their power and technology. Crystals enhanced healing sessions, assisted in awakening psychic abilities, and helped to increase mental capacity and focus their thoughts with clarity. Enormous crystal towers in Atlantis powered the communication networks and energy grids and even controlled the weather. And deep down, many of us remember that and are naturally drawn to working with these stones and crystals in our lives today. Sarah is no doubt one of these people. Sarah has founded the Upper Clarity School of Medicine to share the great legacy of stone medicine, originally materialized by the Wu of ancient China. Sarah is a healer, acupuncturist, and educator, and is immersed in the clinical and academic experience of ancient stone medicine and future crystal technologies, standing squarely at the intersection of blending both the past and the future to help us usher in a new golden age on Earth. And so I leave you here now with my discussion with Sarah Thomas. Well, welcome, Sarah, to the Earth Keepers podcast. So excited to have you joining me today. And I just really want to jump right in. You know, you work with stone medicine, but I get the sense that stone medicine has a bit of a different meaning for you than crystal healing, which many of us are familiar with. So can you give us a little bit of background on stone medicine and what it is you do?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for inviting me, first of all, and hello to your people. I am somebody who is a healer. I've been a healer for a long time, and I'm an acupuncturist. So I've been studying Taoism since I was 20 years old. And then I was lucky enough to go on and have the most incredible teachers teach me about chi flow and what really helps people heal and the deep philosophy underneath change. And so as a healer, I was able to look at the difference between acupuncture needles and stones and crystals and start to study how those two things affect the body in different ways and also how they're the same. So my relationship with stones comes from placing them on the body on acupuncture points and watching the change and seeing how it's different from using needles. And I have a lot of experience doing that. And I think that's what makes my students successful is being able to connect around like what really happens. And so stone medicine is kind of like saying herbal medicine, because back in the past, in ancient China, when everything was seen as a living thing and everything in nature was counted as something that can heal, everything has a purpose. They did a lot of work with stones and minerals, and more than any other group on earth, at least recorded. And they were crushing up stones and ingesting them just as they were with herbs. They were making, malachite crushed up with herbal medicine. They were making selenite crushed up with horsetail, and they were doing experiments with healing in ways that we are not used to this in the West at all. And there's no other place really on earth that you can learn about it in this way. So therefore, stone medicine is kind of like herbal medicine in that it started with tracking the constituents of the stones and how they change the body. And in crystal healing, now it's changed a lot. Stone medicine means a lot of things, so I don't want to relegate it to that, but that's kind of where that name comes from. But crystal healing, I think, is something that is, when we think of it in the West, we think of the chakra system. We think of etheric change. We think of, this is going to bring an energy in, and it doesn't have quite the same relationship to the physical realm or the material realm that stone medicine does, although both of them bridge both the material and immaterial realms. But I think in our consciousness in the West, we see crystal medicine as kind of like an ethereal change, and maybe stone medicine, which most people don't know what that is actually, as starting with actual, constituents making a physiological change.
It's so fascinating, and I think we do forget sometimes how much knowledge and wisdom is held in so many of these other than human beings that we all work with or connect with. But yeah, that they can really have that profound physical effect on our bodies outside of just the energy body that they're interacting with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think on that level, I want to talk a little bit about the soul or the consciousness of stones and crystals. I think a lot of us are familiar in that way, especially if we work with them and have made a relationship with them, that there's personality and consciousness held within them. But how do you see stones in that way?
Well, they reside a lot in the side of the spectrum of the unknown. They are very mysterious. It's the kind of medicine or spiritual ally that I feel like when we get to a certain place where we trust ourselves enough to make contact with the immaterial world and go on that journey of trusting that contact, that's where stone medicine comes in, or crystal healing. That's where people get interested in that. So it's almost like advanced intuitive medicine. It's advanced. It's kind of an advanced energetic medicine, because if we look at a stone on the outside, it's just this rock just sitting there, right? It's like, it doesn't really give us much information. It's just so inert. It just sits there. Whereas a plant, it's growing. You can cut its leaves and see how it changes. You can water it differently, see how like the forces of nature enact upon it in a way that gives us more information, right? And then if you look at an animal or other things, it gives us more information. And stone looks like it's sitting there inert. And that is kind of their secret. It's like we have to go in and be like, there's a lot here that we don't know. One thing that we do know And they I feel like they engage us in our medicine walk so well in this way, being in the unknown like this. But one thing that we do know is that they exist over these long cycles of time. And whereas my life is, 100 years or so, theirs is 450 million years or 2 billion years. And so they just think of the cycle of day and night, the sun coming up and the sun going down. Like, to them, that is a completely different experience than it is to us. The rhythms of nature, the forces of nature, the cycles, rhythms, forces, and cycles, they feel all of that differently than us. And we have to find resonance between ourselves and them, the stone human bond. One of the ways of doing that is seeing that they see things on longer cycles of time. So for a stone, it's like, if I'm coming up to like a completion of a 7-year cycle in my life, that's where a stone is going to be like, okay, there's resonance. Let me come in here. Or if I'm coming up to like, I'm going to be menstruating for the first time, like 14 years old, it's like that kind of big cycle in our lives is where a stone kind of sees us and connects with us, because they just exist on such long cycles of time. So that's one thing about stones and who they are. Another thing about them is that I believe, like many things in nature, they exist kind of in the consciousness of the wild. They exist in the consciousness of the oneness. They exist in the consciousness of nature, which is oneness. And that's a place where they're experiencing oneness. What changes is when someone, it's like, it's an instinct program, like of a wolf, like they are functioning off of their instinct program of being wild and in the oneness. But then when one of us goes and picks one out of nature and an individual creates this relationship with it, there's a different trajectory that the stone can take via that relationship, and a different destiny. And I see stones as having a soul. I see them as something that actually have their own destiny. And sometimes they're pulled out of that instinct program and out of the wild, and their destiny then entails doing some healing and or awakening with humans or animals or other things.
I love that. And I love thinking about this huge long lifetime that they have here on earth. And, maybe we think that they're in our life for a long period of time or many, many years, but it's just maybe a little blip on their radar of their entire time here on earth. It's very cool to think about. And,
Yeah.
it's interesting to me, like humans and stones have worked together for thousands of years. I mean, do you have a sense for what is our affinity for each other? Why do we choose to keep coming together and working together like this?
That is such a great question. I'm glad you asked. The human stone bond has fascinated me for a long time. And one of the things is that I, walk with as a contemplation is stones are in the darkness, in the earth, and they don't move. They don't pollinate like flowers. They don't move across the world through seeds getting spread. They don't get pollinated by pollinators. They don't have a way to move about. You don't have to like check your stones at customs because they could start growing in another country. And I think one of the things about our relationship is that we help them move about. They come up and we, for those of us who understand that they're the great networkers, they're the great connectors, when we move them about and create these grids and help them move and kind of give them legs, I think that that's cool for them, because they realize they get to experience, I should say, like their networking, like communicative capacities, which are huge gifts of theirs. And I love that, because it feels like almost the heart of being a grid worker is to help them move about and just have that connection. And another thing is that if you look at the human stone bond and you think about holding a crystal up to the light, think about holding a clear crystal up to the sun and that clear light coming through that crystal. And when the ancients did that, that was profound to them, because it's completely transparent to the light. It's free. It doesn't have the programming and the conditioning and the karmas and all the little kind of like darknesses or blemishes. It's just transparent to the light. It's a pure vessel to the light. It's pure consciousness. And yet it is in form. It's not just light. It is also in form. So it's when we see that, I think, to make this as simple as possible, when we see that, places in us that we don't even consciously understand see awakening. We see becoming transparent to the light. Our subconsciousness gets turned on. Like, I can also transmute the programming, the conditioning, the karmas, the things that have come up that have created the self in me, and become transparent to the light, and just be pure divinity like that too. Subconsciously, we get that message from them. And that's a great gift that they give back to us.
It really is. And as you were saying that, I was thinking, anytime I have a gathering or a retreat or anything, I always ask people, bring whichever crystals you want to be there, right? We'll build a grid for the time that we're together. And it's always so interesting to feel as they all come together, and it's like they have their own retreat, right? They're all there together and talking and exchanging, and are also excited to be together in that way. And then take all of that knowledge and information and exchange that they had, with and without us, back to their home places. It's always so fun to experience that with them.
I mean, when we work with stones, when we really experience them like that and do those kind of practices, we get to actually experience their joy and feel like, oh, they're happy, they're talking. And that is so cool when we feel that.
It really is. I always enjoy that part of it, and you're right. Feel that joy. Feel how much fun they're having on retreat as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great feeling.
um, so, as we're experiencing this global awakening process that we're all going through, I mean, what is your feeling about how the stones are assisting that, or really why they're on Earth with us or coming to the surface at this period of time as well?
Gosh, I think why they're on Earth with us is so fundamental to how the spirit of Gaia, or the spirit of the earth, is here. I think that she is anchored in the stones and crystals of this earth, like the living consciousness of who she is anchored in them. And if we didn't have crystalline substances here, if we didn't have that, I'm not sure if she could be here, if she could have like stopped at this place. So why they're here is such a beautiful, deep, even bigger question than you're asking. As far as like the change that we're going through and the awakening that we're going through, I I don't know, Amy. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. I feel like there are a lot of changes that are about to come up between now and 2026, 2027. I feel like we're in a very, very crucial window. So many ancient traditions talk about this window right here. Even my teachers talk about that the window from 2017 to 2027 will be the most critical decade that humanity has ever experienced. And we are way older than we think. So to be in the most critical decade that we've ever experienced means that we are just at such a turning point. I think that the collective consciousness has kind of a balance right now between, I think there's a little bit of a 50-50 going on with what people are creating. There are a very small amount of people that are consciously creating a new earth. And then there are a 50-50 balance, I think, going on between like what you could call light and dark. And if I was sitting here saying like, I think everything's going to be great, like I don't feel like 100% congruent with that. I don't know exactly if there is going to be some kind of earth cataclysm. I know that I can feel that. We can all feel that energy. Like, is that going to happen? Because we all know that the next mass extinction is like kind of due to happen. There are a lot of wise sources talking about that as well. I don't know if nature will continue to keep like shaking us off. And I don't know too if it could be the quickening of technology that brings us to some kind of ending of this cycle. So I don't know if it's going to be a really rough ending to this cycle, or if it's going to be some kind of flow change that is workable for all of us. I do believe that we are moving into the next golden age. I believe that is imminent. I just don't know how that's going to look. And I know that it's up to kind of like the whole collective consciousness. And I hear so many people saying bad things about humanity and how humanity should end and how humanity is, even the best people are like, it's just, and I get it because there's so many bad things, bad things. This is so like not Taoist to say bad and good, but that's okay. We can track it right now. But there are so many things happening to animals, and there are so many things happening to nature, and there are so many things happening to people that even those of us who are very in our hearts are hopeful have these moments when we're like, if humans would just disappear, things would be a lot better. And we have these moments like, should we go on? Like, are we really? Nonetheless, we're uploading all of that. When we say all of that, we're uploading that. So it's our choice, right now, what happens to us is my belief. How stones are at play at that. So stones are a big part when you relate with them. They are a big part of helping us awaken. And I think that that's all that we can do is focus on our own internal awakening. One way they do that is that they help us to clear the programs, the conditions, the karmas, the things in our subconscious, the things underneath the surface. And there are other ways that they do that too.
Well, share a little bit about that, about how they kind of are bringing some of those things to the surface, maybe for us to see or work with or release that as we're going through this process, maybe need to be released and healed and resolved in order to get us kind of to this next level.
Yeah, we're in the great purification. The Kogi people say to my mentor right now, I'm not going to go into who they are, but they are very advanced culture of indigenous people who say that this 2023 to 2026 is the great purification, where we are getting cleansed of our programs and karmas and conditions so that we can be held up and become transparent to the light. And I think that what is happening for many of us is that we're living about 10 lifetimes inside one lifetime now, or 100 lifetimes inside one lifetime. If you look at like where you were 2 months ago, it feels like 2 years ago. Right now, we're working through so much so fast. And when we come in, we have past life programs, we have ancestral programs, we have things running through our bloodlines, we have karmas, we have doshas, things that are just not resolved, right? And those are kind of sitting there inside us, almost like, are they going to get triggered so that we can heal all of them? And then we'll have some kind of trauma in our own lives that overlays over that and brings that up to the surface. And now we're like, okay, I'm carrying this thing around that needs to be healed. It is likely from a past life, or it's from an ancestor, or it's from something like that. But now we are triggered and we have to heal this thing. And when those things come up, I know that people like you and me and your listeners, like we have some kind of perspective to be like, this is something bigger than me. This is something passed down. This is something for me to work through right now. And a lot of people just get so caught up in the pain of the past, and their mind goes crazy with stories and their emotions go completely unmanageable. And then how do we be in the present moment at that time? How do we be in the present moment, which heals everything? Stones they're purifiers for us because they dwell under the surface. So they resonate with what's under the surface in us. When we start doing some kind of application with stones, whether it's like elixirs or doing on the body treatments or doing vibrational grid work, they work at the level of the soul. It is profound. That part of us that has experienced all of the lifetimes, that part of us that is so much bigger than our name and our identity in this life, that's the part they touch and activate. And especially, I don't even want to say especially because it does it in any application, but in the grid work application, there is something profound about doing some kind of grid in your yard or in your home. You will notice that your whole soul turns around and looks at what you're doing. It's like tapping on the door to your entire soul and all of its multidimensional realities and lifetimes and dimensions and saying, this is what I'm doing here. And it all turns around and looks. Stones have the ability to work at the level of soul. And that's what they always knew in the ancient past. I mean, they named them for the level of the soul. Jing is kind of the name for crystal in ancient Taoist. And that is the same word phonetically for basically the level of the soul.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's
So when
so
we work with
true.
stones, we do get like changes that are uncomfortable at first sometimes. That's purification. But go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just really letting that sink in and thinking through some of the experiences that I've had, and I think, if I think about a lot of the work I've done, whether it be with the grids, with portals, with my ancestral trauma and healing, with right, is that I find again and again that I just keep running into myself, right? That no matter which timeline, no matter which, where you look in the world, no matter even in my own ancestral line, what do I find but other versions of myself, right? And all of those kind of coming together. And I think you're right, like all then and I'm sure it goes the same in other timelines, right? That I'm there as that timeline is here and et cetera, et cetera. Um, but it really is, I think sometimes we think of a lot of these beings or guides or and stones probably included in that as being somehow outside of us or other than us um, or anything other than us. And what we find again and again is that it's just us, right? It's just we just trip over ourselves in
Mhm.
time and space again and again. And it's really beautiful to think about how they're supporting us through that process and through that purification, because you're right, it really, these last few years have been yeah, very intense and very fast moving. I don't even understand how it's June right now. It really, like, the time has definitely changed in the last handful of years, so it will be interesting to see. And I think I would agree that myself and a lot of other people I know are kind of getting these messages about these next couple of years being critical, and also almost like not being able to see what's next, where we're going, what it feels like we're in this creation point of, like, we're deciding what comes next. And that's why it's hard to see what comes next. We haven't decided, but I don't know that we always take the power or the responsibility to say, like, I'm a creator of the next reality, the golden age, or where we're going. And so yeah, I think that's really critical and important in these next couple of years.
Yeah. And if I may add, I completely agree. And I think creatorship too is a state of consciousness. So it's like, if we're like, well, I should realize I'm creating this, or let me do this practice to realize I create this. It actually doesn't work, because the self doesn't understand that it's a creator. But when we have a shift in consciousness, we just experience being a creator. And I think that there's like a front edge of humanity, because we're all like one big school of fish, and there's this front edge of humanity that is starting to have the consciousness shift that they create their reality. And I mean, that's what we need to move through us. And so, but I'm like always like mindful of, if we say, I'm a creator, I'm creating my life, and we're not in that state of consciousness, that's okay. But what it feels like is almost incongruent, because part of us is like, I'm a creator, but then there's these other parts of us that's like, but I'm not experiencing that. I feel like a lot of stuff's happening to me that I don't. So there's not 100% congruency, but that consciousness is coming down. That is shifting. So it's really good to pray for that state of consciousness, to ask, like, let me experience being a creator, rather than kind of like talking myself into it. you
I
know?
love that, and I think you're right. We all do that, where we know that somewhere in our body, I'm creating, and then you're like, I'm looking around, and I don't know if I created this or not.
Yeah.
Right? If I did,
Yeah.
maybe it wasn't what I wanted.
Right. Or I didn't do that one consciously.
Yeah, that wasn't. I got something wrong there.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Well, so I'm kind of fascinated about this link between organic and inorganic technologies, and also I think we can kind of see these two tracks that humanity seems to be going down right now, and they do feel somewhat separate. And I think a lot of us paying attention to kind of what's happening with artificial intelligence versus organic intelligence are trying to figure out how to reconcile all of that. But it really feels like crystals are kind of this bridge between the two technologies. So I mean, do you have a sense for how crystals are maybe consciously participating in artificial intelligence, or where that's going, or how it may play out?
Well, Crystals are absolutely definitely a bridge. They are a trans-dimensional entity. So they exist in the material realm and they exist then in immaterial realms and the many, many multidimensional frequencies that like span all the way into the void or the singularity. So as a trans-dimensional entity, there are going to be things like riding that bridge between the material world and the immaterial world. And anything can ride that bridge. There are many transdimensional entities. I believe electricity is transdimensional energy. And there are many things that kind of like span these worlds, but this is a huge, when we touch on this with crystals, it's a huge piece of who they are. We just talked about how it's almost like a Gnostic tradition to think that the spirit of Gaia, the living consciousness of Gaia, this earth, is able to be here, breathing, living, a living goddess here, because of her connection with this crystalline form that she can touch down into. There's many, many temples in the world where there's a crystal in the center of the temple, because in that way the deity can touch down into the crystal in the center of the temple. So the way that crystals are transdimensional like this, there are all that kind of different consciousnesses or level of consciousness of playing with that. There are what we can call dark energies playing with that. There are light energies playing with that. There are anybody who understands that you can send things back and forth across these bridges can be playing with that. And yes, there's all different in this realm where there's polarity, there's all different kinds of beings playing and working on things. And I think that AI is, I guess AI is such an umbrella term, but I'll just kind of talk about it in kind of a simplistic way, I guess. But I think that humanity, where it is in its level of consciousness as a whole, is not a very high level. Is not very high level. As you know, on the collective, we have a long way to go. There are many humans who have not even started the journey, like it's taken the first step of awakening. Like they don't see themselves at all. There's no mirror. There's no me seeing back at myself. They haven't even started it. So, and the collective of humanity has created so many of these technologies. And I kind of believe that the consciousness of the technology mirrors the consciousness of the creator. So I think there's some of these AI technologies that are just, I guess you could call it like feed off other individuals, are parasitic, take without consent, things that we would not, as we grow in consciousness, that we would not do. And that whole thing is wildly exponentially expanding. That's the thing about technology. It took the consciousness of humans as a collective, which is not very high, and then just went, bam, let me just exponentially expand this. And if you look at what researchers are studying in the highest universities, it is a lot about these artificial intelligences doing things without our consent, which is, some people call that the definition of evil, whether they're implanted into our bodies or doing things on us on the internet or in this digital exchange that we did not consent to. There's that's an issue to deal with. And there is something that's really accelerating about that. And the kids these days are just, that accelerating, powerful. I mean, you see families out to eat and everyone's on their device. Like that is not turning around. That is not changing. It's too much. It's too fast. It's too quick. I mean, the kids want to type on the screen and see it out. Nobody's putting down their phone. That is not going to happen unless we have a shift in consciousness in humanity. A shift in consciousness in humanity would shift us from these intelligences that are created from the consciousness of the human collective mind to what I call golden age technologies. And golden age technologies are free energy technologies. They don't need to be fed. They don't need to extract from the earth to be fed. They don't need to conquer. They don't need to like colonize to be fed. They're free energy. They go on forever in harmonic oscillation. Things like pyramids, things like longitudinal wave physics, scalar technology, things like crystals, things like monatomic elements, things like water, that if you just study how water moves in vortexes, water itself just moving in certain angles and flows can clean radioactive material out of itself just by the way it pools and moves around. So I think as we grow in consciousness, we're going to tune into these actual sustainable golden age technologies. And that those technologies have a much higher level of consciousness, I would say. I don't know if they can't really pop up until we pop up in that way. And like maybe like most things, they're just a mirror of who we are as like what we're playing with all right now, you know?
Yeah, and I hadn't thought about it till you just said it, but I wonder when we talk about this consent piece of it, we always think about the earth as being like a free will um, place, right? And some of it obviously is we're not even realizing that we're giving our consent, especially some of these very, if you're in a very unaware state. But I'm almost wondering if some of these technologies, it almost becomes like a loophole to violate free will, or will we always be in that space of even the technology cannot? And I really hadn't thought about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very complicated what's going on out there. It's and many do feel that the exponential technology is what will bring us to our next mass extinction. We will see.
We will see. And I think, and you touched on this a little bit earlier, you know, I think it's very common for people to say, if the earth doesn't want us here, doesn't like what we're doing, she can get rid of us in an instant. And while I don't find that to be untrue, what I've found in doing this work and working with the earth and working with the land is that humans have evolved to be an integral part of how the earth works, right? Just like stones are. And at some point, perhaps we put ourselves in a situation where we're more detrimental than we are helpful. But I get the sense that the earth doesn't want to start over, right? If she doesn't have to, right? We've come this far. Can we get further and be an integral part? But I think we have taken ourselves so separately and so far out of our intended alignment that we don't even realize that we're one of those organic technologies and that we can participate in these perfect systems that already exist.
That is so Taoist, seeing us as one with this like beautiful divine creation. I love that point.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I guess the question really is, where, like, are we going to make it? And do we deserve to make it at this point? Like, where are we at?
Totally, I know. And watching crystals, at the interface of all this is so interesting because they're always at the interface of these digital exchanges. I mean, something like Bitcoin, which could potentially, like, there's still so much we don't know about, I feel like, the origins of Bitcoin, but it's something that is potentially the most sound technology to free all of us from the money system that we're in. It's just such a beautiful closed system, like a closed circuit, and it needs quartz. I mean, it would never be here with us if it didn't have quartz. We look at some of the healing technologies that are coming. I mean, how could they ever possibly take place without carbon? And then if you look at what is being done with graphene oxide or carbon to do some of these take without consent technologies as well, it's like the crystals they're always at the interface between these different dimensions. And if there is a nefarious or like malevolent being that is supernatural or otherworldly, or from another dimension, that is kind of controlling all this and wanting to take over, that being too would probably work with crystals to move into this reality and back out of this reality. I mean, actually, I absolutely know that you can see, all you have to do is read about what Facebook's doing, read about certain things, like what is at the very tip of the technology that they're doing, and you'll see there's a crystal there.
Yeah, they're present everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, so I guess the next logical place from that is if people are feeling helpless, hopeless, where can they find hope? Where should they tap in and be looking for that golden age that we believe is coming?
Yeah, I talk about the answer is the age-old answer of know thyself. It's everything that we are looking for answers for are found within, and everything in our external life is a mirror of us. I mean, everything going on is just a mirror of what's going on in our internal world. There are 3 technologies that, it's funny to use the word technology now for this, but there are 3 kind of like spiritual practices that come forth as these avenues. And one of them is prayer. And I know that that word can be touchy sometimes if you come from a background where prayer was used in a way that is just uncomfortable for you, but actually asking for help from spiritual guides and allies or something that you actually feel connected to, that is a really sound way to actually raise your level of consciousness, because we can't raise our level of consciousness from where we are. You know, the same consciousness that created this consciousness cannot fix it. So that's why prayer is the one that where you jump up to something that's like a little bit more whole and coherent than you, and you ask for help. Ask for help. Like, these are the things where like you just say, I have no control over this. I feel helpless. I don't know what to do about this. Please gift me a higher state of consciousness. It's pretty much the best prayer that you could ask for. Another one of those technologies is I call them mystical practices. And mystical practices is where you do something like you're doing EMDR, or you're doing shamanic journeying, or you're doing something where you're going within, whether you're giving yourself a crystal treatment, but you go within and you let yourself have some kind of mystical experience. Sometimes these are guided meditations, but that journey inward, that kind of practice, the mystical practice, what that does is it actually gives us our own superpowers. So it can heighten our inner knowing, it can heighten our intuition, it can heighten our connection to ourself, it can heighten our ability to find the truth or find clarity. So those mystical practices bring us superpowers. And there's one other technology, and that is ritual. And one of the things that ritual is able to do, no matter how you set up ritual, and no matter how bad you're hurting, whether it's just like lighting a candle every morning, standing outside every morning, whatever your ritual is, that is a technology that actually can work on the programs, the conditions, the karmas, the lifetimes, all that stuff down in our soul that's like wanting to shake up and purify and change and transform the way that we're living off the past instead of creating the future. Ritual shifts the programs. It's ritual that actually shifts the program. So that's actually how you can work on yourself, is through ritual. So it's prayer changes the consciousness. Mystical practice gives us the superpowers that we need, like our gifts. And then the third one being ritual, it actually changes our programs.
It's so beautiful and so simple, and yet so often overlooked. Almost I think because it is too simple, right? We're told everything has to be so complicated or detailed, and sometimes it really is, like you say, just going outside and seeing the sunrise and the sunset every day, or whatever, um, whatever reconnects you in that way. So thank you.
Especially with ritual, it can be so simple, and it does something.
Well, I think we've touched on this a little bit, but I did want to ask you directly before we wrap up, but to talk a little bit about cosmic consciousness and kind of what that is and how we can consciously work with that.
I think you must have listened to my podcast episode where I talked about cosmic consciousness and the awakening of humanity.
I
And
did.
I'm glad that we're making that connection, because that way I understand the term cosmic consciousness,
Yes.
how you're saying it and how we're using it. In that talk, I was talking about how when humanity, the collective humanity, is actually in connection with another collective, and it's kind of a cosmic collective, it's a higher octave collective. Maybe it's everybody in the galaxy. We don't even have to define it, but it's a higher collective, it's a higher harmonic collective, and we're in this exchange with it. So when all of humanity is basically uploading into that higher collective something like, we don't deserve to live, we're ruining the planet, we feed that into that higher collective, and that higher collective is far more powerful than us. And that's the kind of thing that could make an asteroid hit the planet or a super volcano go off or something, because it's really just taking information from our collective and saying, okay, like this is what we want. It's almost like just a mirror response, and it moves all the way up to the, in these harmonic octaves, all the way up to the whole oneness. It's just kind of the next higher octave of collective. And we want to be careful what we upload into that. And as an individual, it's like we can't control what the whole collective is uploading into it. But what I find really important for me is to bring myself back to a state of compassion for humanity and a state of gratitude for what, the things in my life and what I have. And gratitude is one of the most important things to ever have or upload, because it shifts all the programs. It's a magical state that can shift all of them. So it's a really profound one. And so in my own life, I'm like, when I hear people around me, and we all do it because we have spiritual conversations all the time, but when I hear people be like, maybe we just shouldn't be here, or we're messing things up so bad, or humans are such assholes, or humans are doing this or that, it's trying to become conscious of having compassion and or gratitude in that moment to at least do my part in uploading something into the cosmic consciousness that is, I think just a little bit more love-centered than like judgment.
Yeah, and as you're saying that, I'm thinking the true power of mass media, right? To synchronize thoughts or feelings, at a similar time, whether that be a feeling of panic or fear, or, a feeling of coming together and love and joy, but that really the consciousness we need to have when we are participating in a group thought, a group think of any kind, how much amplified or how amplified that feeling or thought would be when we combine it with millions of other people.
Yeah, I feel like it's more than just even multiplied, like it's exponentially more powerful. And it goes to show why there have been such deep, long agendas for manipulation or propaganda. It's like they know that it's powerful. But I'm glad you brought that up, because it's those like waves going over everybody, whether it's through like a Marvel movie or a commercial, and coming out consciously or subconsciously, is one of the things that keeps us in the lower state that we are in.
It's true. I've had the experience once, a handful of years ago, where um, I was. We have friends that want to come over and watch the Super Bowl every year, right? And we don't watch football, but that's fine. We'll get together and eat a bunch of food and watch the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And in the lead up before the game started, there was some big patriotic tribute, right? Like, I don't know what it was, but and it felt weird. I was watching it thinking, this seems like a weird place for this, right? It was very showing different wars that Americans have fought in and all of these different things, but it was meant to be very, patriotic. And I physically saw something come out of the TV, and it was on a wave, and it was, like some frequency, some waveform that was coming out to, I felt, tap everybody into this thought or this feeling or this whatever it was. And I kind of immediately was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, don't know what it is, don't want it.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. But I thought, gosh, what to experience that in that way, you realize, of course we're aware of television and radio and now social media and all of these things to, broadcast a frequency, but to really experience in that way, you realize we don't always know what's kind of layered on top of these things that we engage with, and really being kind of conscious and careful about how we engage with them.
Yeah, I love that story, because it's something that you experienced and happened, and it's not like you were looking for something to be bad or we're in a suspicious place. It was just like, here we go. And I remember when Obama got elected, and like I was actually in a bar when he was elected. I was like 26 or something like that. And they were showing these images of everybody on the streets. Like there was like millions of people like dancing in Washington, DC and all this. And then the whole bar was cheering. And then in his inauguration, I think there was more people on the federal mall, like the Washington Mall, than like ever before. There's like a million people there. And it was so like everybody was so enchanted. Everybody was so enchanted by that. It was just, and I learned later that I listened to this sound expert who studied dolphins for his entire career and studied like the frequency of the sounds that they make. And that those experts that were so expertise through dolphins on sound entrainment had worked on his campaign. They had brought all of their technology to his campaign for like the first big experiment of their work. And watching a whole interview with that guy it just all made sense. It was like, that's why everybody was so enchanted. Not just that, but the technologies behind the scenes are powerful.
Right. And we may or may not be consenting to them yet again. It's not something that we're stepping into and saying, I'm aware of what's happening and I choose to participate. And yet we are in many ways choosing to participate and not necessarily knowing, like you say, what's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that before about the dolphin researchers.
Sometimes you learn something and you're like, now everything makes sense.
Right.
That was going on. Like that was a powerful campaign.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just to kind of wrap things up, you mentioned the golden age that we're heading to. If you could imagine and create the image of what that would be, how would we be working with stones and crystals? How would we be engaging with the earth in this golden age in your mind?
Gosh, nobody's ever asked me that like so clearly like that. And the first thing that comes to my mind is compassion. I feel that there would be compassion in the place where the self is running in all of us, which is just fear and a state of separation. And I feel like we would be, what's also just coming is as I'm seeing like a lot of work being done without actually having to touch the body, or a lot of work being done without actually having to have the crystal right there, or a lot of work being done at a distance, like consciousness exchange, vibrational exchange being done. That is like an overall wave of compassion for all living things. I'm huge about, the liberation of the earth and people and kids and animals. Like, so that's what I feel like I see.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Well,
What's yours? What's yours?
that?
What would
I
you
feel the same way. I'm like, oh goodness, I don't even. That's why I'm asking everyone else.
Oh, really? Are you?
But I am curious. What is everybody's visions? But I feel the same way. I think when we really tap in and feel and appreciate the world that we live in, I think so many people are trying to escape, right? Or don't feel like they belong here, or are disappointed that they are here, or whatnot, and totally missing the beauty that is here and the experiences that we can have here. And so I think in my golden age vision, it really is like understanding how to work with this place that we have, right? Really being connected and in communication and in partnership with the earth and the soil and the trees and the plants and the animals and the stones. I just think like what a richer, more beautiful experience. And I think through that, you can't help but tap into that love and compassion and those feelings for all that we have and for each other.
Yeah. I agree. That is beautiful.
Yeah, well, as we come to the end here, and I could chat about these things all day,
Yeah.
but I'm sure there are many people who want to learn more and connect with you and find you. So if you can share where people can connect with you.
Yeah, sure. I am at upperclarity.com, which is UPPERCLARITY. And I teach stone medicine classes and have a lot of different classes if people are interested in learning more about stones and crystals from an ancient tradition. And also, if you just want to do a little Instagram checkout first, I am at Sarah with an H _E Thomas. And that you'll see all our community working with crystals and stones.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me here. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Yeah, Amy, blessings on your Instagram and your podcast and all the things that you're doing.
Thank you so much. Sending my deepest gratitude to Sarah for this thought-provoking discussion, and I hope it's inspired you to see the stones around us in a new and unique way. If you enjoyed this episode and think these ideas are worth spreading, I hope you'll share it with others. In the meantime, thanks for listening. And thanks for being here on the earth at this moment in time. I'll see you back here next week.